Hi, my name is Alexis.
And I'm Anna.
And I'm Evelyn.
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Katie.
We are the Marmalade Mermaids. This week, our flag means power. Season 1, Episode 9, Act of Grace.
I heard Elizabeth Banks on this podcast, and she directed Pitch Perfect. She's a comedic actress. And so one of the things she talked about was her experience directing. And that in the world of directing, which I also did not know, is that there's this established uniform of like wearing all black, like cargo shorts, cargo pants, whatever. But there's like this very set uniform. And as she was directing, she realized this doesn't feel like me. This isn't me. And I know it's what people expect of a director. That's how you know who's in charge on set. She realized what would make her feel like her and really exercise the authority and power on the set was being extremely feminine. So she would wear dresses and pinks and be very feminine, and which was out of what's expected when you're in that role. And so the thing she specifically said on this podcast, I didn't forget, was that this is what power looks like, is whatever she's wearing. And this very hyper, not hyper, but like very, her way of dressing, right, was to wear these like really fun dresses and colors and not subscribe to what, had been identified as the uniform. And I thought that was really interesting. And so I, at the time in my job, I'm a director of an agency. And I had an employee at the time who was super inspired by this podcast episode, because it was just cool to think about leadership and power. And so I told her what I heard Elizabeth Banks say. This is what power looks like. It's whatever, she's wearing. And because she's the one in charge, so whatever the person's in charge is wearing, that's what power looks like. And so I love that. And so she would remind me of that every now and then, especially like when there were times where times when we were really celebrating something really cool that happened at work, or like when I'm really struggling. She was like, well, whatever you're doing right now, you've got the power. This is what it looks like. I'm like, yes, this is what power looks like. And I'm working on this really, 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 really important project to me. Like, it is like, this project means the world to me. And I've got a call from this person, and they said, we need to have a meeting right now and get all of these people together. Like, there are all these important stakeholders that we have to get in one room to sort this issue out. And it's like 9 o'clock in the morning or like 9:30. And she says, we need to meet like in an hour. And I'm like, an hour? And I'm wearing overalls and this like bright orange t-shirt that says Wonder Woman on it, because I have plans to get on a plane. I think this project's just kind of simmering right now. I gotta get out of town for a minute. In this world that I'm operating in, it is suits, it is heels, it is dresses. It's a hyper professional dress code in this world. And she's like, you have to be here in an hour. And I live a half an hour away from my office. And so I'm not going to get back and forth to my office or to my house to change. And so, of course, like everybody's commenting, they're like, oh, like your overalls. I'm like, anyway, but I just had to be calm and cool and confident and just like, this is what power looks like. This is what power looks like. And because I care so much about the project, it wasn't about what I was wearing. It was about my authority and my experience and my passion over the project, which is totally made me think of Elizabeth Banks, right? She has a vision. She's making all these things happen. All these people have to ask her. She has to make decisions. And like, this is what power looks like. And I'm like, it really doesn't matter. It's you and however you embody that power. And it doesn't mean you're wearing a power tie. And it doesn't mean that you're yelling at people, right? Or it's whatever you do to assert that. And it was just like a great test. So, and I'm still in this kind of role. And so it's important for me to remember that, like, not only what I think of power and that this is what power looks like, but then also putting that into practice. And what does that mean when you actually do that? And what does it mean for you? So that's my story on power.
Before we get too far, let's stop and remember what happened.
So the British have come to Steed's ship, the Revenge, and he's like, okay, let's fire back. And all of a sudden Blackbeard climbs on board and he's like, raise the white flag. And Steed is going to be a shot. And then he's like, act of grace, say act of grace. And they know the law. And so Steed says act of grace and Ed says act of grace and the whole crew says act of grace. And then they gaslight Chauncey, which, oh, bless his heart. It's hard, but he's totally gaslit. Like, he is a pirate. He's great. Blah, 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 blah. And your brother's, yeah. And so Steve and Ed go to a work camp. They institute Act of Grace, and Ed finds a very zen place, and they have a little romantic exchange, and they're going to run away together. And Izzy takes power of the revenge, calling it Izzy's revenge, which sounds like an intestinal disease. And then Ed says, okay, you know what? We are going to run off from this work camp. So and people on the revenge are not happy. Izzy's a rough pirate. Now we're going to talk about where we see power in this episode. Well, when you shared your story, like, because I don't know how many times we watched the episode, but I think we all watch the episode multiple times before we record. And I had thought about power in a lot of different aspects of where we see it show up. But then I just thought over and over again about how Blackbeard and Ed exhibit their power, because it totally changed, right? He's like, it's my beard, guys. This is not who I am. Like, and he still commands the same presence and same authority in this Zen Ed way. So it was an interesting way to see power reflected in Ed's character.
No, that's I actually I've been thinking so much about other ways to actualize that. I actually didn't think about that one. So that's amazing. Because yeah, you're right. That's exactly Steve's response, because it's in his name. It's his name. And then the fact that like he unpacks that and he's like, but it's not black, it's a gray beard. Yeah, that's a great point. I think, and you're right. And it's crazy. Like I would say throughout the show, of course, but like so many characters have that experience about what it means to be power. And I think like, since we're talking about Steve and Ed, Steve has the same problem, right? No one believes he's a pirate because there's this expectation about what a pirate should look like, what the ship should look like, how you treat your crew, how you talk to your crew, decisions you make, right? And so that's actually a great point, because that's what I was thinking about a lot with like Steve, and he gets it in this episode a lot, right? About the rejection of the idea that he's even a pirate, to like throughout so many like interactions, right? Well, you can't even exercise this thing because you don't have that authority, you don't have that power. And he's like a pirate. And then your point about, I love that, like Ed's got the same thing.
Yeah, I like this conversation about Ed's beard, because it kind of makes me wonder, because I feel like there's lots of examples of Ed having power, but also willingly giving power away, like letting go. And so that I'm really starting to like think now about that, like the shaving off of the beard, like, is that him? It feels like it's him giving the power away, to be like, it's fine. Like, I want to just fold things and I just want to be here. Or is it stepping into the power of being who he really wants to be? Or is it both? But yeah, I do think it's funny, Steve's first reaction to like, but you can't be Blackbeard without the black beard. And then when the crew sees him at the very end, like the first thing they say is like, what happened to his beard? And then it's a running thing throughout season 2 of like, what about the beard? And so, yeah, I think it's a really interesting question with, again, thinking about the story of how you present your power. Is it doesn't seem like, obviously Ed's not attached to the beard as much as he is like, this is what I have to do because of the choice I made for Steed. But yeah, is it really a very powerful move for him to sort of release this thing that everyone else has, like this signifier that everyone else looks to as like the emblem of his power? And he's like, that it doesn't matter if I have a beard or not, but yeah, just things that I would think about now watching it again, to be like, oh, can you track it? Or is it sort of moving and shifting with each sort of like interaction that he has with people and their reaction to the beard? I don't know.
That's a great point, because they don't even hesitate when he shows up. As soon as he shows up, there's no question about who's in charge. And that's a great point. Like the beard had nothing to, even though they are, like you said, they're talking about the beard, but you can feel it, the calm and the peace that just like washes over the deck as soon as he like climbs aboard. They're like, oh, but also like, oh, phew, we have a boss again.
Yeah, because in that moment, technically you have before he steps on board, technically you have 2 captains. You have Olawande and you have Izzy. And you have this mutiny, which Ed just comes in and he asks for tea, and everyone's like, well, I guess that's over. And I guess he's our captain. So.
No, but yeah, I do like this whole beard thing, because I feel like throughout this time, I've always felt like with Ed, he's always battled. It seems like for like this whole journey, it seems like he's always been battling this title, this like this persona he's had and everything. And then now like the solution has been to like shave off the beard and finally coming to like, this is me, this is Edward. Like, I'm really trying to, like, I'm finally, like, I really believe he is like coming to who he wants to be and everything, because throughout, like, at least with this season, the past couple episodes, it's been a lot of like just coming to understand like what he wants, what he actually wants and everything. Like, I'm done with this like Blackbeard life and everything. I just want to be Ed. And then so the removal of the Blackbeard, it's finally like, I'm here. This is me now.
I think that goes back a lot to that Pinocchio story, that Ed getting rid of his beard like has now stopped being Blackbeard. He's like, I am Blackbeard and all the things that that means without a beard, and I am Ed because I'm fully showing up as myself. And then I think it's really interesting that when he gets rid of the beard is when this queer dynamic happens, and the term beard, like, to cover for your sexuality. He's like, I don't need a cover. Like, I have picked Steed. He is mine, and I don't need like some other kind of transparency, like some kind of other veil about that. Like, I'm going to be completely transparent. So I think there's a lot of power there, and it's interesting that it's at the same time that Steed becomes a real pirate. Like, he literally has that he's a proper pirate proven.
That's amazing about what that means, right? And it's like, yeah, it's like what that means to really come into yourself and what it looks like and the expectations of, and and that's how you really become like who you are. And as you have these experiences, and it makes sense to adopt, right? It makes sense to adopt whatever came before you as you step into roles and experiences and to really figure out who you are. And then along the way, you're like, okay, how does this look for me? And that's amazing. I hadn't even thought about that aspect of it. And what we can see, and I would say too, like, if we were to maybe, if you start off the season and we were to ask the question, who do you think is going to step into their power first, like, and authentically and really who they are? I don't know if I would have chosen Ed right away, right? And I don't know who I would have chosen, but to think about that's interesting because we see Steed is still on that journey. And I think, Anna, like what you're saying, like going back to revisit the beard and like, and what that means, because there's part of it that he's okay with, right? There's the part that Steed is okay with. I think if I were to guess, I'm like, oh no, I got money on Steed. Like, he's got it together because he's got his finery, he's got his like, his different, his clothes. He built the ship exactly the way he wanted, and so you would have thought, oh, he is the one that's stepping into. He knows who he is, and he's okay doing this differently amongst this group, but he's got his own work to do, and so that's really interesting to think about that too, and what those things mean happening at the same time for our beloved characters as they're on this journey to like figure out who they are and watching them step into this and what it does to the other person, right? Because that's an interesting part of this too, right? Your point too, like about Kay, like him like shedding the beard, and it's almost like I think sometimes when you make a move like that, you think now the people around me are really going to see me because you feel vulnerable, you feel safe to be vulnerable to do that. And then they're like, ah! Because now you really are you. And that's interesting to think about too, that he's at his most like me, but now look what happened. That's interesting.
Well, that reminds me of your story of like, they had that reaction when you walked in with the overalls. People are like, eh! It's the same, like, is that still our boss?
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally. No, I actually can say I put that out into the world a lot where I'm like, oh, this is me. That's it. I love that connection. That's a great point.
Yeah, I think it's such a cool conversation because it just makes me think, because I've like, studied costuming and that kind of thing. Like there's the idea of semiotics. Like the symbol represents, like the crown represents the king. So whoever's wearing the crown is the king. That's just it. But this is sort of taking that and saying, you take the beard away and he's still the most powerful, pirate, and he still has all the power. And again, like he can walk on and everyone's automatically like, oh, well, you're in charge. Obviously you're in charge. And so, yeah, I like how he kind of sort of challenges that in taking away the beard, and then everyone else's reaction to it. Because, like, to your point with the story, what Alexis, when she was commenting, made me think of, I was like, oh, the power isn't in the clothes. As much as we love the clothes or the overalls or the beard or whatever, like, that's not where power is. And that made me think of what I looked up was the kind of like the etymology about power, being able to exert force. Mm-hmm. Being able to change, being able to control or influence. And it was interesting because then it got me thinking about the difference between strength versus power. And strength is the capacity within yourself to like do something, but then power is using that strength on something else. And I think that is really, really important because, like Alexis was saying, like, oh, it's people can react and they kind of react to something that's new and different, but the power isn't taken away because whatever is on the outside changes, whatever that signal is, so the king is still the king, even if they don't have the crown. As much as we like to put all of the power in that symbol, it's still, again, just a symbol for the power that the person holds and is able to then use to influence their surroundings and the circumstances that they're in.
Oh, I had a thought because when I was originally thinking about the theme of power, I kept thinking of hierarchy and I kept thinking of the structure and how much of power is granted because of a structure, not necessarily because anyone earned it. Like the king didn't earn being the king. It's just the structure. That's just he inherited that power. Sometimes power is granted to people, like the Navy officers are granted certain power. Sometimes power is taken, like the phrase to overpower someone. I think like the Navy overpowered the pirate crew. If things were different and the pirates outnumbered the Navy, it wouldn't have happened that way. They didn't have the strength to like overpower. But just this, like, how is power? Do we get power through our experience, through our, how is it granted?
And that's great because that makes me think, and I had never thought about this before, you have the transfer of power with the crew where they vote for who's going to be the next captain. And even Fang and, Ivan are like, yep, we're on board with this. Like, it cannot be Izzy. Like, it just can't. But then they're still going to vote. And again, have they ever seen that model? They're like, no, we're going to decide who's going to be the captain. And it's the structure. It's that they've decided on and agreed upon. And they're pirates to be like, no, we got to have some order when we're going to pick a new captain.
Izzy, of all the characters we ever meet in Our Flag Means Death, I would say is probably the most proficient of the pirates. Like, he knows all the things. He knows how to train. He knows how to make a crew. He knows how to like do successful alliances with the British and work the system and all the stuff. And yet he's such a bad leader. But Olawande, we don't know how much experience he has being a pirate, enough to pass in the Confederacy of Pirates. Is that the right term? Or Republic of Pirates. But he definitely has all of that support from everybody before he didn't seek for the leadership, but he has everybody's confidence in being a good leader.
I think that's exactly the thing is like, that's not Izzy's power, right? Because of what you just said about him being proficient, that's his power. That's not leadership. And that's the thing. Blackbeard doesn't need to know all the rules and all the things when you've got an Izzy. And that's actually a really great point. Izzy actually knows his role, but he also knows that a ship needs a captain. So it's almost like that comes out of his knowledge of the structure and what all the roles that need to be filled. And so I didn't even think about that until now, that I wonder, like, does he do that out of like a sense of like, he really does want to be in charge, or he just wants things to be, I like what you said, he's proficient. And so he knows that someone needs to be in this role. He knows that he's got all these years of experience, so maybe it should be me.
Yeah, I think this point about Izzy is really, I like it a lot because when you were talking, it made me go back to that moment. I'm not sure which episode when, I think it's when they first get to the ship, when they first get to the Revenge, and Blackbeard is giving his sort of pretend plan of like, we're going to kill Steed. And then he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to just be gone and I'm going to be, this wealthy landowner. And he's like, but the ship's going to need a captain. And Izzy has this look on his face. He's like, well, I guess it could be me. Sure. Yeah. And that brings up that idea of like, I could be captain, but he's not he's not fighting Blackbeard for that. And then you have the alliance with the English trying to save Blackbeard, and Chauncey, before they've even kind of gotten rid of, Steed and Ed, is already calling Izzy Captain Hands, because of what he's been doing has sort of earned him that title. But again, I go back to like what we've said before, is the minute Ed's back, is he's like, it's fine, it's totally fine. Because I think, like you're saying, he's probably the best pirate of all of these pirates, even though Blackbeard is more well known and this and that. Like, and I think, again, it comes up at the very end of season 2, where it's like, you're an underrated pirate. Like, people don't give you enough credit for how important everything that you do is to like making everything work. And I think that's really speaks to Izzy, where he's never really grasping for power. He's never really trying to go behind people's backs or kind of make sure that he's seen to be doing things that will set him up. He's like, no, this is just, yeah, I could do that. But leadership is also not Izzy's strength either. So it's best that he doesn't do that. He's not the captain.
I love that, Anna, because I never thought, I love that I get so much out of our conversations. I never thought of it, but Izzy is a little bit dichotomous. He needs a black and white structure. And I think for me, people who are in leadership who I've really appreciated working under are people who have the ability to embrace ambiguity and nuances. And it's kind of because Izzy's so stuck in that black and white dichotomy, I feel like he is excellent as second in command. He is excellent at being the right-hand man. He doesn't know how to be a leader, though, because he can't appreciate what other people bring to the table. But on the other hand, he remembers people's names when they die. And he remembers like how much it takes, whereas Ed is just kind of like, whatever. I mean, they're supposed to die. They're pirates. Who knew in an episode about power would talk so much about Izzy? I don't think of his power very much in season 1 at all. I don't know if I liked him at all in season 1. So that leads us into our dear Victoria's Havruta question, which was really well thought out. So I don't know how you want to say it, but go for it.
So the big question for me was, why does Steed do what he does, right? Why does he not go with Ed? So it's the excerpt where Steed recalls his memory of Mary. And actually, I think just for the sake of where I'll just go through it real quick, just that part. So they're sitting on the beach. And the exchange is, Ed's talking about the plan, right? Like, we can just get out of here. And so Ed says, that's the point. Our old lives will be gone, dead, never were. What do you say? And what immediately happens is we see a flashback of Steed recalling a memory of Mary. And Mary says, I know we never would have chosen each other, not in a million years, but all we have is this one life. We immediately go back to Steed sitting with Ed, and Steed says, yeah. And Ed says, yes, ? And then Steed says, I think so. Ed says, yes. Okay. Yes, ? And Steed says, mm-hmm. So I guess one thing that I will offer is just to start like with looking at the text itself is Ed asks Steed a question. And Steed says, yeah. He doesn't say yes. He says, yeah. And then Ed wants affirmation. He wants validation. Right. And we could get what I think so I just think, and we unpack that, but I just think there's a question mark. He's yes. And then Steve says, I think so. And Ed asks again. He says, yes. And then, okay, yes. So first it's like the enthusiasm and the question mark. And then Steve goes, mm-hmm. And so I think that's fascinating to either watch that deteriorate and or evolve in just those words that are exchanged, not trying to read anything into it. So I guess that's where I'll start with whoever wants to pick at that, and then wherever you want to go from there.
I thought it was, your question was very close to a question that I might bring up, because I was watching the whole time for like, at what point does Steed decide to make his decision? Mm-hmm. Like, at what precise moment has he like, okay, I'm actually not in? I don't know.
Yeah. And I like this question a lot. And I like the way you framed it because, you're asking like, is this the moment when Steed decides not to go with Ed? And I don't think so. I actually think this is the moment Steve decides to jump off that cliff and be like, I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to go with Ed. And then we have another moment where it's like, oh no, I can't do that. But I like what you're saying. It's like, yeah, yes, yes, yes. I think so. I don't know. And I think if you're just looking at the text, you're like, oh, that's interesting. Like that's how you're conveying it. Because there's so much that they do with the acting. But yeah, I see this moment is Steve sort of stepping into, I think I'm going to go for it with him, but I'm also really scared. And it's also happening. And Steve says this later in season 2. He's like, it all happened so fast. But I like what you're saying about really slowing this moment down to be, and then tying in the memory of Mary and what his memory of her and the things that she says that I think ultimately helps sort of propel him into, why don't I just try? Because I only have one life. But also it's really scary. And do I think I have the strength and the power to see this to the end? And I don't know. I think there's a lot there, but yeah, that's how I saw this moment. It's like, this moment is him actually just going for it. Like, I think I'm going to try, with Ed.
Do you think if Chauncey didn't show up that he really would have gone?
I think there's 3 key scenes that feed into this decision. Because it's so funny because I was asking myself this question before I watched the episode. I was like, I want to see if I can catch this moment. And in my memory, I thought this might have been it. And then that's also why I chose this scene, because I was already kind of expecting this would be it. And as I'm watching it, I'm like, this isn't it. However, I think it informs all these other 2 key other moments that come up. And I think that interaction with Chauncey is another one of those key moments where I couldn't decide between unpacking this one, that one, or like when he actually decides what to do, right, and shows up. Or I mean, I guess there's a few we could, but those are, I guess I'll say there's 2. I think there's 2. And I think that moment with Chauncey is also like, I don't know what's happening. I think could be something happening there that could also inform it. And when we talk, and the thing that I think about the uncertainty here is like, there's a lot going on because, to go back to what we were talking about, like Blackbeard's beard, he's just shed his skin into his true Ed self. And he really says that the beard is gone. He initiates the first physical contact, intense physical contact we see, which is fun and exciting and terrifying. And that's also what I wonder is going on in Steve's mind. And he's like, wow, the face I'm looking at is not the face I've been looking at for the last however, but that doesn't mean I don't care about this person, because then the memory of Mary pops up. But yeah, I wonder about that other scene. And just to go back to like what I think there's a lot going on in his head as he's like taking this leap off of the cliff, which is also relevant later in season 2.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Chauncey moment is when Steve's like, I'm out. I can't. But I think there's reasons for that. We could definitely, we could talk for a long time about that scene, but I like that we're focusing on this one because I think there's so much raw vulnerability in this moment that really has nothing to do with the kiss, although the kiss is lovely. But it's a lot of that. Ed's really talking to Steve about how he feels and what he thinks and what he wants. And this is something Victoria and I had talked about at one point when we were just having a conversation about it, that I think this moment is very sweet because Steve has no idea how much Ed loves him. He's in love with him. He's just sort of like, oh, this is nice. And this guy, said something nice about me and now he's kissing me. And, and I think Steve doesn't understand that he's in love with Ed. And so I think like it's this, having this moment where you don't necessarily have all the information yet. And there's all of this new information coming in quickly. And are you able to process that and figure out what you're going to do? And so I think that's part of the hesitancy or maybe the uncertainty. I like the word uncertainty, but yeah, I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot just to watch. And so then trying to think about it's a lot for these characters to experience. And Ed's just ready to go. Like Ed has probably already really thought about this moment. He's already has a plan. He's like, great. And he seems like he always comes up with plans very quickly of like, oh, we do this, and we just go for it. And Steve doesn't seem like that's his nature. And so even if Ed hadn't pre-planned this moment over this offer, he's just like, there's always a plan. Where Steve's, we could do that. But I think he is sincere in this moment of, I think so, because I think that's really honest. He thinks so, but there's a lot of things that still have to get worked out.
One of the things that I was like with those 2 lines that I like latch onto is just basically, I really like that Ed says, you know, our old lives will be gone. And then we chose the memory where, well, like, and they chose the memory where Mary says, well, we all have this, all we have is this one life and everything. And that's why, like, I'm on the party of like, Steed is still very unsure as to with like he should go with Ed because I think he's still very much dealing with the fact because like see in like the first starting of the episode where Steed's like basically all my like I'm past my dues, like I have to confront this issue, like these two things where it's like the death of Nigel and leaving Mary and his like family and stuff. So those two things and everything. And so coming back to the like coming to this point where it's like the interaction between Ed and Steed, I think it's like kind of unfurling more of like I think like I very much like have to confront this idea, this fact. And then like on the other scene where it's all like Mary's all like has stated Steed is dead. And he's just like, what? And everything. So it's even more like I really have to like go back to this like other life, like figure out what's going on because I think Steed's still very much like in this place in his mind where it's like I don't know. I know that I really like this, but I also have this other like I have this past life that I can't just throw away, which is why I think he's so uncertain because I feel like he still is uncertain as to if he could just throw away that other life, the wife and kids, because of Mary, of everything that he's put Mary through and all that stuff. And like I think her line of like this, we have this one life and everything. It's like you can't just toss away all these different lives. You can't just keep on making a new life and doing a new thing and everything. Like you have this one thing that you have to keep going on. You have like these like sometimes there are things you can let go and things that you have to like latch onto for like, you know, to be like a different person or so and so. But I think that's why Steed is very much like, I don't know, because I can't really just continue leaving this other life behind because she still has a hold on me, basically. Like these things still has a hold on me.
Well, and I also think Steve's being a little brat. He's just like, how dare Mary say that I'm dead? Was that out of spite? It's like, Steed, you left your wife and children. Do you think maybe there are some legal issues? Like she came in with her own money. And in order for her to have access to your land, do you think like, why are you caring? You have not thought about me. Like he has these like haunted memories of Mary, but not like a longing for her or a pining. And then when he goes back, it's like, what did you even hope to accomplish here? Because you didn't come back for love or to make amends or caring. So like you just came back to kind of judge and like shake your finger. I think.
Katie, I totally agree with you because that is actually the third scene because that was the third scene I built in my mind of like what informed Steve's decision. And it starts when they arrive at that camp and now his identity is being challenged because he just lost the world that he created for himself. He had decided he was going to be a pirate. He was going to be on the ship. He just lost what he left everything for. And then that was the other scene I wanted to unpack. That very short exchange where he gives his name and then gets this information. And he's like, there's so much going on in his head in that moment about his identity and his ego. And I remember thinking as I'm putting this together, I think that's where the thought of Mary first comes up. Right? Because then she ends up almost being like an intrusive thought because his ego's just been challenged. And then this memory of this not core memory, but this memory of her giving this life advice. And then I think is sealed by that interaction with Chauncey. And again, like this challenge to this what he thought. And I'm like, that's why this scene being sandwiched in between those two scenes, I think is so interesting to think about the progression of his thoughts because I don't know. I go back and forth because I'm like, he's not sure for a myriad of reasons. I think the reasons Anna brought up about like the not knowing the love and everything, but there's this other thing nagging at him that's an ego thing. And that's what I think is so just amazing when he walks in the door at the end. Like you said, I'm like, what did you think was going to happen? Because he knows what she did. He doesn't know why, right? He doesn't really know all this world that she's created, but he knows that part. And so I wondered, I'm like, did that create this thing like you had to prove something? Like, or did just the idea that someone thought you were dead, is that enough of a challenge to your ego? But anyway, I totally agree with you. And and then I loved what Evelyn and Anna also brought up, because I'm like, nope. I was like, nope, that's what I think. But all of a sudden I'm like, nope, I don't, that's why I love this scene. I think it is like, it's the meat in this sandwich of how he ends up making the decision that he does.
I want to add to just reemphasize Evelyn's point about this idea of like, I have to, the whatever the fee has come due, or like I have to own up to these consequences for my actions. And I see that a couple of times. I even love that they picked the song at the end that says, "You're going to reap with this what you sow."
Yeah.
Like, it's a theme in this one. What else did I think? There's a reflection. I know I had talked about like this. Steve is choosing to like walk away from Ed, right? This is a leaving. And we saw like Ed kind of had a leaving in the other episode. And this feels like a reflection and kind of like a trope that sometimes happens in romance stories, like they can't be together. So this is like a reflection there. But I also appreciated that in the previous one, we talked about this, like, you never left. Like, there can be a physical leaving, but you're still aligned with that person. And I think maybe Stede might hold that in his heart, like that I can physically leave, but I'm still aligned. And it doesn't feel like betrayal to Stede. Like, maybe
Yes, I agree completely.
like, okay.
I love that. I
agree completely, because I feel like season 2, there's episode after episode after episode of Stede having to kind of own up for this choice to go back to Mary. And like, he is like, you like abused us and like released the Kraken on us and all this. Whereas Ed, like, Stede didn't have any promise that Ed never left. It was very tongue in cheek, right? In Ed's heart, he had made that commitment. So for him, he thinks Stede probably knows, like, dude, I've always got your back. I am your number one. I will always be there. But Stede didn't know that. And he's genuinely, I feel, shocked. And I would have felt so betrayed. And I think that Stede just accepts Ed back with this love and compassion. And like, sure, he's telling me raise the white flag, raise the white flag. He's telling me act of grace, act of grace. He's telling me to go to prison camp. Okay, go to prison camp. He's hugging socks. Okay, hug socks. Like, whatever. But I feel like Stede accepts these things about Ed, and he doesn't get that same grace back. Stede all of a sudden like reframes things in a very different way. And we've seen him do this a few times. And it's kind of like, I don't know if it's a guilt complex. I don't know if it's like, don't write me out of my own story. I don't know what's going on, but I feel like that's what's happening with him and Ed, because at first he was like, oh, what's the plan? Like, get me in on the plan. And then Ed's like, oh, okay, we will run away. I will make the plan. And there's probably a lot of hesitancy there because Stede wants to be involved in the plan. He wasn't involved in his family's plans. He wasn't involved in their conversations about who's your favorite farm animal. And for him to be told to sit passively and just rest while I take care of the big boy work, like, that doesn't feel good. And there's some of that dynamic I think we see play out very early on, right there in their first conversation at the beach about being a couple.
I love this conversation. I think it's so cool because I disagree. And that's okay. But I really like you all sort of sharing this perspective about how to see Stede and what Stede does and maybe why he's doing it. And I think it's valid. I think it's super valid. I don't see it that way. I think you're absolutely right. There's a strong case for this is ego. This is absolutely ego. But I think for me, talking about those 3 moments that Victoria, and I agree, those same 3 moments that you're dead, we think you're dead. And that's a really, if we're talking about power, that's a really cool power move for Mary to be like, he's dead. I mean, she's such a boss. And then the conversation with Ed, and then the Chauncey thing. And for me, what I connect to with Steve's decision to return to Mary is when Chauncey says, "You defile beautiful things," and Steve is like, "I think you're right." And again, I love this argument that like this is just all ego for him. But for me, what I read into that was that he's worried he ruined his family. He's worried he destroyed them when he left. And the going back, which is super awkward. And I agree with everything you guys are saying about like, all this, it's not quite working. But I think the reason he leaves again is because he didn't ruin them. Like they're all living this wonderful, rich life that doesn't involve him. And now he doesn't have that guilt about like, oh, did I really destroy my family when I made this decision of who I thought I wanted to be? And I think the going back is necessary for him to fully be able to step into a relationship with Ed, to be like, I do love this person and I do think I want to be with them. But again, that's my take on it, because I really connect to what I absolutely agree can be seen as betrayal and shutting down. And we're like, there's all this other stuff that is not clear and it can be really painful and hurtful. But like my personality is one of like, I need to pull back and sort of organize what's going on before I can step back in to whatever it is you're asking for me. And I get called out on it. Like my whole life I've been called out on it. Like, what are you doing? Like what? Like you're not talking, you're shutting down, you're doing this, you're doing that. It's like, I'm trying to process everything that's going on, and I'm trying to put it together because I'm an introvert. I've got to put it all together and put the puzzle together inside my little shell. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to like engage. But
Same.
it's not cool. I get that people are like, what? No. And you can really hurt, like you can really hurt feelings that way. But anyway, all that to say is I was reading this little thing that I'm part of this newsletter thing. And there's this part where the author is talking specifically about withdrawal this week and saying, and what I just want to quote is that she's saying, withdrawal can be fertile ground for radical overhaul, that withdrawal can still be thought of as a relational move, that you're not shutting off the relational ties. You're actually trying to take space so you can make them stronger. Mm-hmm. And I connect with that. That's who I am as a person. And so I choose to see that in Steed's actions. And I love that you guys are all like, no, he's a jerk and it's ego, because that can be true too. I think it's fascinating. Could both things be true? Could he just have ego in it, but also be really trying to figure out who he is and what he wants? And I really like Evelyn's point from earlier about the whole one life to live, because we only have one life, because and I don't know if it quite works, but I think the whole point of the show is that you get more than one life. You don't just have the one. And if you're talking about this as a model for queer identity, that you have this thing that you're given, that you're told, and that you're expected to sort of see through to the end. And I think, I don't know, I think I can see all of these characters being like, no, I'm not going to be that anymore. No, I don't, not that life anymore. And I'm actually going to like, and I think that really ties into the theme of death. Of like, you just let that die, and then you have the ability to begin again. So those are all my thoughts connected to all these really cool things that you've all said.
I love that.
It's so funny because like as Katie was like taking us back to the Chauncey moment, I was ready to like I have this thing called that I rant and recant, that I was going to recant for like, because Katie, as you were talking about unpacking that Chauncey moment, I'm like, that's the moment. And then Anna, what you had said, and not exactly for the same reasons, but I was like, oh no, that moment with Chauncey going back to what I said was like, no, it really is the moment. Like these other things inform and I guess now as we're talking, I think what I'll say is like, I think these three key scenes that are key for me, it's watching Steed's process. They're very Steed focused and allowing us to watch his process one way or the other as he's navigating what you were talking about, Anna, with these decisions. And so then he does end up at the point where it's like, okay, guns in hand, put the bullet in, fingers on the trigger. Am I going to pull it? Yup. And now he's got to either he does something. And so it's so funny because now I want to go back and watch again and see like what I like as thinking about everybody's insight about what those pieces are. Because I think it's exactly what we don't get from Ed's perspective. Because we actually, like, there's stuff going on with him formulating his plan. It's just that I think, to your point, and it's actually the flip side of the same coin. We just didn't see the process. But so to Steve, it looks like it just like went pew, 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 pew. But Ed was like, cogs are going, thoughts are flowing. He's thinking, because that's what he does. That's what, as a leader, right? That's what he does all the time on the ship. It's him like sausages, frankfurters, like, and you're like, wait, what? And I think that's exactly it. Like, and is that we all process information differently. And then to going back to, like, I think was it Alexis that reminded us of the, like, I never left, or was it Evelyn reminds us of the I never left? But like, that's it, right? When you find your person or a person, you have to be able to go and have your process. And you're going to process things at different times. And someone might think you're shutting down, or someone might think you're just popping off great ideas. But if, like, either way, right, everybody's got their process. And if at the core of this relationship is I never left, that's actually how all this stuff gets tested. That's how you're like, oh, wait, you're one of my people. You're my crew, right? Yeah. You're my crew.
Right. Which I think goes to Katie's point about how Stede is able to accept Ed, because Stede's like, I understand that process. Like, you got to come, you go out and you come back. I totally get it. But for Ed, and I always have to remind myself, especially as we go into season 2, that last thing Ed gets from Stede is kiss. Yes, I think so. Mm-hmm. Nothing. And then he's gone. And so he doesn't get all of this other stuff. And so I absolutely understand Ed's anger and the legitimate feeling of betrayal, because you don't have any of this information. You weren't even there when you got to see Stede processing, like, oh, they think you're dead. You kind of hear him talking about it, but you're busy folding socks. And all you have is this moment on the beach. And then he said he was going to be there and he's not there. And to Stede's point, you could have gone and told him, I'm sorry, dude, I don't think I can do this. So I'm not letting Stede off the hook, because you absolutely could be like, I said yes too quickly. I think I need some time. And Stede doesn't do that. And he definitely could. So yeah, it's complicated. It's complex. And I think it's hard when we don't necessarily show up as our best selves in these moments of stress. It's tough.
Well, and I think Stede and Ed are such interesting characters, right? Because they have such radical compassion and love and empathy in some moments, and such callousness. Yes. Like, they go to both extremes, both of them do. And I think all of these points about Stede are very valid and true, and about Ed. But yeah, it's interesting that Ed chooses to sit there and wait with it. Mm-hmm. And not, because later on in season 2, Fang is like, do you think you talk so much because you're worried about being alone with yourself? I think Ed is able to do that, but he gets definitely broken down by this experience. And it is interesting that Stede doesn't pull him away. I think rightly so. He's probably so rattled by Chauncey and this idea of, you defile beautiful things. You, like, ruined your family. I love that you brought that up, Anna, that you made the best pirate in all of history go cuckoo is a big thing. And like, there's something there that maybe Stede is like, ugh, Ed's probably better off without me. But Ed's not going back to being a pirate. And Stede really, really, really knows that. So I think that that's weird too, because he knows that he's already messed up his family, and his family financially is fine. So I think he has to go back. I love that you said that, Anna, because I think he has to go back in order to let it go. And I think he lets it go beautifully, because Mary is graceful and a queen. She's amazing.
I really like this point, because with what you said, Anna, I very much agree. And I like your what you said, Katie, because, like, I think, one of the things I always think of, like, the very known idea of, like, you got to love yourself before you can love others and everything. And I think what we're witnessing with Stede is very much like, I think it is a combination of, like, challenging, like, it was a challenge to his ego, and then, like, also just trying to figure out what's happening with, like, his family that he left behind and everything, like, very much a combination of two. And I think it was a point of, like, with Stede, like, the entire journey with him, he's very much always like, he doesn't know. It always felt like he has to be, when he was a child, he was set like, you're always going to be this way. Like, you're always going to be this. I can't remember the quote that he's been told by his father, but it's always this way and everything. And so it's always a constant like challenge of who he is. And so I think the thing with Steed is like basically he's going back to Mary in like a way of like, he needs to figure out, like he really needs to figure out what he like who he need like what he is like as a person. Like, okay, I'm gonna go back to Mary C, like, because I think, I want to know what's going on there, and also figure out like, is this the life that I'm supposed to live and stuff? Because Ed like is becoming this person that I don't know if I don't know if I'm to that point yet, because I don't know who I am, because I'm still very much like keep thinking keep thinking in the past. So I really need to close that door to continue to move on, to move forward and everything.
Yeah, that's a great thought. All those things you guys both just said. I love that, because that made me think, Evelyn, when you were talking about like a question of Ed and Steve, do they like themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Do they really like themselves? And I think you see Steve at the very beginning, you sort of get that struggle with, I am adequate, like I'm working on it. And we haven't gotten that yet with Ed as much, but, we obviously will in season 2. And I think, then that question of like, do I like myself? Do I love who I am? Do I think I'm lovable? Do I think other people genuinely love me? And then, the person that I choose to love, do I feel safe with them? Do I feel safe with them showing up as all of these parts that maybe I don't think are so lovable or are so likable? And do I think that person's going to turn? So yeah, I think everything that kind of like, Victoria, Katie, going into Evelyn's comment, it kind of really sets up all of this stuff. It's just churning up all this stuff that you're going to see in season 2. And there's so much there. And I really like this conversation, because it just, if anything, it's just bringing up more and more questions of like, like going back to like unpack this moment and other moments and then the whole season. So yeah, really cool thoughts.
We are going to do our blessings. Victoria first.
So my blessing is for Frenchie. When I was thinking about power, one of the things, like a different thread I thought we could pull at was like power misused, or in my words, not fully germinated. Bless Frenchie, which I will do this. I may use it later, but bless Frenchie, trying to exercise what he thought was a superpower of his. And it completely Looney Tunes its way into a Chauncey-like moment where anyway. My blessing is for Frenchie and his power that is not fully germinated.
Alexis?
Yes, my blessing is for the structure of the Navy Academy that gave Ed a kind of peace and really let him settle into his softest, most chill self. I loved that. Like, yeah, he had to trim off his beard because it's regulation. He has to do these chores. Like, I think he's digging it.
My show blessing is also very closely related to Victoria's, and that's for Roach. I love crazy little boys. I love them. And I know Roach is a grown man, but he didn't ask, like, please make me the one who gives the distraction. But he's like, I'm going to create a diversion. And he makes the most beautiful face. And I love him for it, because there's something I see there. And I'm like, I see you, Roach. I love you.
My blessing is for the crew of The Revenge, because they go from episode 1 to, we are going to just talk about mutiny openly and maybe we should make it happen. And wait, someone heard us. And now, to mutiny is seconds away from happening. Like, they got it together. They learned the rules. They got organized. They were working together. So it almost happened. So that just shows how far they've come when it comes to a particular task that they can work on together. So it's just really impressive if you go from the mutiny discussions that were very haphazard at the beginning to they understand and they're working together and they know what it means to be a crew and to work together as a crew. So, and thankfully, like, Izzy's okay. So it all works out.
You love that. Group of the crew blessing. Evelyn, who do you want to bless?
I'm going to bless Alawande. I feel like this is maybe the second or third time I've blessed him, but I'm going to bless Alawande because, one, I think I love Olawande because I think he would be a good captain because of how he is and everything, kind of a similar vein of like Steed, where it's just weird, like we're gonna be nice and I'm gonna care. But the thing that I really liked about Olawande in this episode, where first you like saw him when they were doing the interrogating of all the crew members, with all Olawande's point was just like kind of trying to back up Steed again of like, he didn't really kill him. So how can you really say that? But I'm going to go back to the point of I made where it's like empowerment. I think Alawande kind of proved himself to be like a fine leader because he is kind, he's caring and everything. He's very nice and stuff. And I think in that way he would have proved to be a very good like leader to his crew, because I always enjoy those kind of like people. I never think I could be in that leadership position, but I really do enjoy those leaders who are like will always like try to like who are flexible and will try to help like their team members, their people in any sort of way and everything, like really cares for the people. So I bless Olawande because he would have been a great captain.
So next week is episode 10, the season 1 season finale. So what is our theme, Alexis, for the finale?
I went back and forth. I thought of many things. And the time has come, ladies. This week, our flag means death.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
Love it.
Anna was like going there, and she's like, she's talking about this. Like, yeah, I have to go for it. Next week, our flag means death. Until next time, when we get to meet together and talk it through as a crew.
You're going to reap just what you sow.
Overthinking things as usual.
Calm down, Mr. Wavy Blade.
I didn't even realize piracy was happening.
Everyone's got their own style.